So Germany have recently announced that they will be returning the Benin Bronzes back to Nigeria. So what are the Benin Bronzes and what significance does this move hold? The Benin Bronzes are a collection of works from the ancient Kingdom of Benin. Now I won't go too much into the kingdom itself because I've already made an entire video about that, which you can go and watch after this one. But basically in 1897, British forces invaded the kingdom and essentially burned it to the ground in what they called a punitive expedition. Whilst ransacking the king's palace, they discovered a huge collection of bronze statues and plaques. These bronzes were taken and sold around the world to North America and Europe to pay for the punitive expedition, which I talk about more in the other video. Now, Germany currently has their collection of over 1,000 bronzes on display in museums all across the country. And despite selling massive amounts of the collection to other nations around the world, the majority of the Benin Bronzes remain in the British Museum in London. Now that just gives you a tiny glimpse into the scale of the looting that occurred when they destroyed the city at the end of the 19th century. It's thought that in total the British looted around 4,000 individual pieces. By the way, if you are enjoying these videos, then make sure you hit that subscribe button for weekly bite-sized content on the magnificence of Africa. Most of the looted artworks are thought to date from around the 16th and 17th centuries, and they were made using the lost wax method of casting. Now just to go over this technique briefly, firstly you make a model out of wax, basically what your final piece will look like. Then you cover that model in clay and plaster so that when you cut it out and remove the model, you have a hollow impression of the inside of the clay. Essentially a mold. Then they would pour hot wax into the mold, coating every surface, and once the figure has solidified, it's removed from the mold and coated in some more plaster, and this is where it would be prepared to ultimately melt the wax and pour in the molten bronze. Then you obviously pour in the bronze and let it cool, and once you've done this you can start to remove the mold and reveal the bronze sculpture inside, and from there they would then add any finer details that may have been lost during the process. It does sound a little bit complicated, but I'll leave a link to a video in the description that shows this method step by step, but that's basically the general gist of it. So this is a technique that was perfected over thousands of years, and the Kingdom of Benin was able to use it to create this enormous collection of intricate and sophisticated pieces. Much of the collection was made up of plaques, which were used to help tell the story and the history of the Kingdom of Benin. Now, because of this, they are seen as very distinct. A lot of African artwork, not all of it, but a lot of it has a more abstract feel to it, whereas these tend to be more accurate depictions of reality. In fact, despite their beauty, it may be better to understand them more as historical records rather than artworks in the traditional sense. Now, although plaques make up a fair amount of the collection, the sculptures are probably the most eye-catching, and you can really feel like you're getting an insight into the regal history of this kingdom. Many of the heads are of kings, almost like how throughout history the British monarchy has used portraits to tell the story of their reign. The Kingdom of Benin used bronze sculptures. Now, just for a second, let's just ignore the looting and the destruction of the kingdom. Just the pure fact that these bronzes have been on public display for so long seems to really go against what they were meant for. It's said that the Benin Bronzes would have been used for private religious ceremonies, so they've always carried a deep, inherent and personal value. They weren't some extravagant display of wealth or flaunting their abilities and talents. Dr. Linda Buckley from the Open University, who's so knowledgeable about this topic, highlights that we can't detach the Benin Bronzes from the Edo people, the people of Benin, and their original purpose to be used in religious ceremonies and ritual. The reason why there are so many examples of heads is because this is the specific part of the body that was worshipped when somebody dies. This context is the only way to truly understand the significance of the Benin Bronzes. So for me at least, it doesn't really matter how many people around the world have had the chance to view them, they'll never have that same connection or resonance as they would to the Edo people, who still inhabit the same land to this day, should they be returned. So the Benin Bronzes were due to go on display in a new exhibition in Germany, and their argument for not returning them is that yes, they are part of the history of Nigeria, but they have since become global. They supposedly changed the perception of Africa from a barbarous continent into a continent which is steeped in history, culture and beauty, which of course it is. That's what I've been showcasing on this channel. But let's not forget how Africa has been perceived since the Benin Bronzes were stolen. So as I said, they were looted in 1897, and the scramble for Africa had been officially underway since 1884 and would continue up until 1914. European powers were invading and colonizing, and the aims of it were simple: to strip Africa of its resources, be it natural ones like gold, ivory, palm oil, or its artworks like the Benin Bronzes, if we're going to call them that, and to impose European culture on the continent. And around this time, sort of late 19th, early 20th century, we see things like human zoos popping up around Europe, displaying savages or primitive people with the notion that they had been cast out by God because their culture didn't recognize Christianity. The looting of the Benin Bronzes did not change these perceptions. Now, of course, when you discover such a massive amount of amazingly intricate pieces created by a civilization with such precision and mastery of the craft, if they are a people that you regard as inferior, it may perhaps open your eyes a little bit and maybe even start to make you reconsider the hierarchy that your own civilization has stamped on the world. But even if that is the case, is it enough to justify keeping ownership of something which is so precious and so meaningful to so many people when it was stolen from them in the first place? So Nigeria plans to build a museum in Benin City, where the kingdom once stood, and where the Edo people, the descendants of the Kingdom of Benin, still remain. So in effect, they are being returned home. But there are definitely some concerns amongst Nigerians about the return of the bronzes. Some say that they don't trust the government to take care of them properly, and that they might even sell them back to Europe. Others suggest that they could be stolen directly from the museum in Nigeria. So if they are returned, they'd be much better off in the hands of the Edo people, rather than in a museum where essentially they'll be owned by the state. Others see it as a greatly significant moment, not just for Nigeria, but in the recognition of the importance of culture around the world. Of course, there are museums all over the world packed full of history and culture, which was ultimately plundered and hoarded. Remember, if we're just talking about the Benin Bronzes alone, the vast majority aren't actually in Germany. So maybe this could be a small but significant turning point. So what do you think about this move to return the Benin Bronzes back to Nigeria? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to go and check out the video where I go much deeper into the Kingdom of Benin itself, its customs, its incredible layout, and its record-breaking walls. I'll see you there.